All right, Jim.
Mm,
We've got a, I don't know, what would you call it?
a listener
Submitted.
submitted suggestion.
Yes.
A bit
And
of a
he's
kind of
frustrated.
question, kind of theory.
Some frustration.
I think maybe there's frustration there. It might also just be sufficient, like musing upon the thing to be
Okay.
like, what's up with that? What's going on there?
All
Like
right.
some suspicion, perhaps. Perhaps it's suspicion. That's what's going on.
Let's hear it. What do we got?
All right, here it is. Looking at the list of the RSPBA prescribed tunes.
Yes.
All right, we got marches, strathspeys, and reels.
Yeah. Well, and
And
for a little bit of background, it's a list of tunes that in some cases I think you have to pick from the list of tunes when you're competing. I'm not actually up on the exact rules, probably, but the concept is it's a list of tunes that you must choose from in certain cases, like for March medley sets and so on.
mhm,
I'm pretty sure. So it's kind of
mm,
a big thing if you want to go compete over there,
mm.
or if you're from there, you're going to be working with this list.
So, writes regarding that list, there are tunes on those lists that I've heard played in the Glenfiddich. In what world would the RSPBA expect a grade 4 band to be able to play some of those tunes with any degree of proficiency? Then he provides us with what he deems a cynical hypothesis.
Yeah, this is his explanation. Note that it does not
Right.
reflect the views of the hosts.
Right. Yeah. In fact, maybe I should bleep out name so that even he can be anonymous.
Yes, that's probably a good idea.
Okay. So the cynical hypothesis here is those tunes are control tunes. They are on the list so that bands who pick them are instantly DQ'd for not recognizing that those tunes are far beyond their ability level. Then just requests that we discuss this.
Is that it?
There's a corollary that he adds here. So here's the corollary. What is an appropriate difficulty level for your band? He mentions that he watched one of our previous episodes where you gave us some grade 5 band hacks. And your top suggestion there, Andrew, was don't make mistakes.
Yeah.
And so we're simplifying tunes, picking tunes that are the correct difficulty level, that kind of thing. And he says, so where do you position your tunes to keep your slightly better players still interested versus keeping them easy enough that your weaker players can keep up? This is assuming, of course, that you've already told the weaker players that they should skip any embellishments that pose problems. Some tunes are just going to be a poor choice for some groups.
Yeah. Lots to talk about here, and we should get into all of it. But I'm particularly interested in this idea of tune difficulty and how to pick stuff that's right for your band. It's definitely a challenging problem. But shall we get through the conspiracy theory elements first?
I mean, those are the elements I'm most excited for.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's dive into those.
And I only have a very loose understanding of this. So I'm not part of the RSPBA, and I wasn't there when this was invented, but I've been around the scene for a while. And
Andrew, I don't even begin to have a loose idea of what's going on here. So we are in a great position to speculate wildly.
Yeah. So the prescribed tunes, okay, my understanding is that it comes from out of that. So the prescribed tunes come from bands doing really wild stuff where you'll have a competition where the spirit of the competition is to play an MSR, let's say, or to play a set of marches. And then bands come out and they do super wild stuff. Like maybe they are playing Glenfiddich Greatest Hits, which is way beyond the level that the band should be trying to focus on. Or maybe they're coming out and they're actually playing like something you see occasionally when you judge is bands that are, what they're actually doing is playing hornpipes, but just because they call it a march, they think but it's like not actually in the spirit of the thing. So the prescribed tunes concept, which I believe the RSPBA invented, like because we now do something very similar in the USPBA, and I know lots of associations do have prescribed tunes. What that's for is basically to give guardrails to beginning and intermediate bands. Like that's the
Would I be right?
That's the spirit of the prescribed tunes.
I think that makes sense. Like at first it does feel a little bit like over controlling to me, I'll be honest. But then I think to myself like, well, we are specifically talking about a competition. And I guess it would be really difficult for judges to like judge between a person who played a 4-parted march and a person who played a 4-parted hornpipe and said it's a march,
Yeah.
like that does kind of make it a little harder to make like judgment calls maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always going to be that friction, right? Where you want the rules to be more liberal, but the more liberal the rules become, the more difficult it'll be to adjudicate, right?
Yeah.
So you could compare it to other things like figure skating or snowboarding. You're looking for a certain set of tricks in order for your run to be in the spirit of snowboarding competition. You're not looking for, I don't know, pliés, like snowboard pliés, and then like Jackson Pollock paint spraying. Like you could do all those things on a snowboard, but the spirit of those snowboard jump competitions is like you're looking for certain things within a range of ideas. That's what you're looking for.
That's great. I love that. You imagine a snowboarder going down the half pipe just slowly and just using spray paint to paint the half pipe.
Yeah.
And then finishing their run and the judges being like, how do I judge that against the person who actually did tricks?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Hey, it was cool, but not what we're looking for here.
Yeah. And you could also say, well, my extreme wipeout was way better than their,
yes.
it was way
that was
better.
Actually a trick.
Yeah, it was way better than the thing that guy did, even though he landed it. And so it's like, being able to land it is an agreed upon constraint, right?
Yes. So you can't say that your wipeout was just an avant-garde.
Yeah.
You're just shaking up the competition.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And so I think the prescribed tunes, it comes from that. And I think that most people agree at the lower levels that those constraints are good. By the way, in the upper levels, we sort of self-impose the constraints because you start to understand that that's sort of how it works. For example, most medleys have an opening tune that's either a hornpipe or a march or something. And then most medleys have a slow air in it, and most medleys have stress bass and jigs. Even though I don't think it's codified in the rules, it's just something that's gone on. But at the lower levels, sometimes you see some wild stuff. And for a variety of reasons, number one would be the adjudication of the contest. You don't want to compare apples to oranges when you have a competition. You want to compare apples to apples, see who has the best apple. That's one of the reasons. But the other reason is a judge can see that what people are doing is not actually in their developmental best interests. So to be a successful pipe bander in the future, you need people to be able to play simple marches well with good tone and good ensemble. So you have to start somewhere.
I mean, I have been in the position of needing to like pick tunes and put together a medley for a grade 4 band. It can be overwhelming when you have all the tunes in the world as options. So I can imagine it, like maybe that's part of it too, is like, especially for lower level bands, maybe part of the reason they're lower level is because they're like a newish band, or maybe there's a high likelihood that the leadership in that band is going to be newish themselves. I can imagine it being very helpful to be like, well, tell you what, here is a list of 12 tunes that are developmentally appropriate for your group. Pick from those instead of everything in the Scots Guard collection or something like that. You know?
Yeah. I think it would be interesting to make it so you had to have some prescribed tunes, but then also maybe allow a little bit of your own. That could be cool. Anyway, I'm just looking at their website here because I'm not actually up to speed on the exactitudes of it all, but it says the purpose of the prescribed tunes is to provide tune selection options suitable for the designated RSPBA grading of bands. And remember, this isn't just about the RSPBA because I know other associations have similar things. So we'll just use this for discussion. And then it says major championships, grade 4B and novice juvenile B. So these are the entry level grades for adults and for kids. And it says 4 times 2 parted marches from the prescribed tunes list. All tunes played must come from the RSPBA prescribed tunes list. And then if I click on that list, my guess is that this list has about 50 different tunes on it. I could count them, but it's looking like around 50. Stuff like Walter Douglas, White Cockade, Weary Maid, Taking of Beaumont, Hamel, Sweet Maid of Glendorel, Liberton Pipe Band, etc. Drunken Piper, 79's Farewell. So these are tunes with a little bit of bite to them, but also carefully selected to not be wild and crazy in terms of difficulty. Now, there's some tunes that are going to be a little tricky in the 2-part list. Just hang on, though, because I'm not quite done yet. Now we have Grades 4A and novice juvenile A, for the major championships, they're going to play a 4-parted march in 2/4. They're going to play 4 parts of RSPBA, and they're going to play 4 parts of reel. In other words, they're going to play an MSR. Okay. Now the MSR content, it looks like you are allowed to do 2x2s. So you could do those 2-parted marches and put 2 back to back. Looks like that's allowed. Or you could do the 4-parted RSPBA, or you could do the 4-parted reel. And then they have lists of 4 and 2-parted stuff. And this is where it definitely gets a little interesting to our listeners' credit. I think they're correct when they say some of these tunes are, they're sort of level lists or something, in the sense that I feel like, yeah, you might hear Arthur Bignell at the Glenfiddich. I think that's true. I think I spotted a couple other ones. Glencallig Castle is a really difficult tune to play, and it's on the list. But then there's also Muravord, and there's also Prince Charles, which are, and 79. So they're on the list. Inverness Gathering, good tune. Anyway, these are tunes that are on the list, and yeah, some of them are quite difficult to play. Donald McClellan of Rosse is definitely something I've heard, I think, at the Glenfiddich or at those levels of competitions. But that was my first solo 2/4 march when I started playing. So some of those are, quite difficult to play. I think you have options though, and all those 2-parted marches, you could stack them together. So yeah, there are some tunes that might be a little bit more difficult. But again, I think the purpose of this is to provide guardrails. Are they trying to trick people into picking tunes that are too hard for them so they can automatically disqualify them? I don't think that's, I think that's a little silly.
You don't think that like maybe there might just be like 1 or 2 tunes slipped in there?
Just
that it's like,
let's get
it's like maybe not so much to trick them into picking it, rather that if someone does pick this indicates sort of a lack of maybe a lack of self-awareness
Sure.
For the leadership or something like that. Like, are the competitions so huge in the EUSPBA? That's where you are. The competition is so huge in the RSPBA that there's a need to, is the word cull? To cull the quantity of bands that you're judging down to a smaller group, because there's just like so many that like if you have an easy way to just lob off a third of the competition and not have to worry about it, that'll make your job easier, make the day go by smoother.
It's not, I mean, like first of all, that's not how it works, right? So any band contest that I can think of, you have to rank from top to bottom. So there is no chopping of anything. Right, you still have
to.
I mean, you still have to rank
maybe you
things
still
from
give
top
them
to
numbers, but you don't have to. Maybe then I'm trying my best to like build a case for the cynical. What did you say? Cynical hypothesis, cynical theory.
Well, I understand where it comes from, but I don't think there's much of a case for it. Like I understand I understand looking at the list, thinking, oh my God, like I could never play this. But there are some things that you are able to play, and then I do think that at a certain point, all tunes are really difficult to play. And then you could flip it around. Like one of the things we do at the dojo is we're willing to look at any tune, and we find that any tune is playable given the right approach. So we could talk a little bit more about that. But I think that the conspiracy theory that some of these tunes are just death traps and you're trying to be tricked into picking tunes like that, I don't think that's really what it is. Now, if you pick a tune that's way above your ability level, yeah, that could definitely be a big mistake. Don't do that. I mean, if you do pick a tune that is a high ability level and you pull it off, that could also be extremely impressive. And there might be situations where that's appropriate.
That makes me think like basically no matter what, you really gotta know yourself. You gotta have a good feel for what your group can handle.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it boils down to.
And that's going to be true whether they prescribe tunes or not. And I think that the RSPBA prescribed tunes list is a pretty darn good list. Like even if you're not competing in the RSPBA, it's always worth a look at that list when it comes to picking new material, especially for your MSRs and stuff. Like if you're considering a tune, if let's say you're in grade 4 or grade 3 and you're considering tunes in your MSR that are not on that list, you better really know what you're talking about, because most of the tunes that you're going to find that are doable and playable are somewhere on that list. Not all. I'm sure there are exceptions, but that's a very carefully curated list. And by the way, the whole world, right? Anybody that wants to compete at the Worlds is working with that list. And so they also get regular feedback on that list. And so it's been error corrected over the years to include better and better picks. Is it true you'd hear some of them at the Glenfiddich? Yes. But the spirit of it is these are beginner and intermediate friendly tunes that are going to set you up for success.
Yeah, I'm looking for it now. I'm almost sure that the PDF that I started working with for the House of Cromdale was from this list, but now I can't find it.
It's on there. I saw it on there somewhere. It's under the Jim. It's under T. Yeah.
Classic. So here's an anxiety that comes into my mind, Andrew, when looking at a prescribed list like this. The context in which it's like actually played out for me in the past is with common marches. The idea being like, oh, a student is learning, just getting started, or like I haven't soloed in a long time, or never soloed and want to try it, or the band is new, or whatever the reason might be. Like, what if part of the medley or the tune you compete with could just be a common march? It's something that you've already been playing, you feel pretty comfortable with it, go for it. My anxiety has been, oh, well, if it's a common march, that just means that like it's obviously like really widely known. Mm-hmm. And what if that comes with an expectation of a specific setting? And so then looking at this list myself, imagining I was in the RSPBA, would I then need to have some anxiety about like, well, if I'm going to play the House of Cromdale because it's on their list, and do I need to stick to the setting that's on the list? Like, will the judges be so familiar with that specific setting that if I change it, it's going to be really obvious and maybe they'll really dislike that I changed it?
Right. That's a good question. The answer is both yes and no. So,
gotcha.
Right. So if you're gonna compete in the RSPBA, it would be good to have an experienced person guide you on that. And the answer is, a map tune, there are lots of different settings of most of those tunes. And if you play different settings than exactly what you see on the RSPBA site, that's fine, as long as they're good, acceptable settings, right? We can't write our own third part of it. But let's say there's a setting of the tune where at the line ends, instead of playing B doublings, you're playing all B strikes. Totally fine. Or gotcha. Let's say, it might be totally fine.
Maybe.
Yes, maybe. You might want to double check. Or
that's great. Might be totally fine.
Yeah, and sometimes there's phrases that could be played round or they could be played dot cut, depending on the style of the tune. And those slight changes are totally fine. But you have to have been around the scene long enough and hanging out long enough to kind of know the acceptable variations of the tunes. It's not something that's going to be codified into law somewhere, but you kind of want to know.
Yeah, have you ever noticed that like there are some tunes that maybe, I'm trying to think, I think it usually would come up like the last line of the tune. So it'd be like the second line of the fourth part, if it's a 4-parted tune. Sometimes it is just an exact echo of the second line of the first part.
Right.
But then sometimes it doesn't recall the first part. It just continues with the fourth part.
That would be
and
another...
It's like you'll hear the same tune done both ways. Yes. And then it's like, oh, what does the judge want?
Yeah. And the answer is, in that case, it doesn't matter. That decision is kind of up to the performer. But in some cases, it does matter. And you just have to...
Yeah.
That's just something that you have to be around enough and soak it in.
You used a term there, Andrew, that I hadn't heard before, map tunes.
Well, sorry. I don't think they call them prescribed tunes now. They were originally called map tunes. And I think that stands for musical appreciation or something like that.
See, I was thinking like it just immediately made sense to me to treat one of these, like if I clicked the PDF button on the RSPBA list, then I'm going to get a setting and I could treat that as a map, as like, here's the guide. This is basically what you're going for.
Yeah.
And from there, a little bit of variation here and there is probably going to be okay, but that's the map.
Yes. And maybe that's not clear enough. But yeah, the tunes that you're submitting, there is wiggle room for acceptable variations of those settings. You don't have to play that exactly. Another example, you might simplify the tune a little bit here and there, like get rid of or replace some of those doublings because it's the right decision. And all of that is legal to do. The other thing, I'm actually not certain about this, but I'm pretty sure that you can write harmonies and stuff for some of these march sets. I'm not certain. So you need to double check your math.
I hadn't even thought of that. So in your band competition, you could add a harmony to it and it's going to be okay?
Think so, like in the map
like everything else, it's like, it might be fine.
Do not quote me on that. Do not quote me on that. Like these 4B and Novice Juvenile B march sets. Does it say anything anywhere about that? I actually don't know. You want to double check. I remember when we had a novice band, but this was a long time ago. So maybe things are different now. But I remember our band that we took over, the Scotia Glenville Kids Band, we took third in the novice juvenile, I want to say. And I remember Inverary won. And I remember both of us had fairly creative harmonies and stuff that were augmenting it, even though we were playing the map tunes. So that may have changed. So do not quote me on this. Make sure you do your research, folks. But there's some wiggle room there, but they want you to play those tunes.
I do wonder about stuff like this. I'm sure that the professionals who are keeping these lists curated are on top of this kind of thing happening. But kind of to Mark's point, like maybe without the necessity of there being like a conscious effort to put in something that's too difficult, it might creep in over time. I would wonder about that, that like, especially if the same people are on the board for a long time, they themselves might start to get bored with the list without even realizing it. Like, oh, that's an interesting fun tune. Let's add that to the list kind of thing.
Yeah. I think it's a fairly conservative process. I don't think they're adding things and taking them away willy-nilly. But yeah, I of course, that's always possible. But the benefits of having those guardrails far outweigh the potential criticisms, which is that, the people selecting the tunes have a bias and, this, that, and the other thing. I think the guardrails are all in all pretty good. And I'm sure it'll continue to be corrected over time. Now, what kind of stuff came after this, Jim? There were some discussions about tune difficulty and everything.
There were two questions, really, and I only read you one. But the first one was basically, how do you go about picking the right tunes for your group such that your better players aren't going to get bored and leave?
Yeah.
But your weaker players, or maybe we should say newer players, learning players, can keep up, assuming that you are already letting the newer players skip over the problematic embellishments.
Yeah.
Like beyond just the embellishments, of course, like there are some tunes that like the melody just moves so quickly or something like that, or it has like a reverse dot cut pattern or something like that that's going to be hard regardless of what embellishments they're using. So how do you pick the right tunes for your band? And then he did also follow up with like, how do you move people throughout different grade levels? But maybe that's a topic for another day. You tell me.
Possibly. So I think that these are all good questions. So one question sticks out. How are we supposed to pick material for the band, right? And that's always a good question. Do you pick material that's a little bit on the challenging side for the group, hoping they'll rise to the occasion? Do we pick material specifically so that our lowest common denominators can handle it, thereby causing the more talented players to potentially lose interest or something like that? These are all good questions. And I think you have to be really careful. And I think for different bands, it would be different things. I could share with you a couple of things that might cross my mind. Here's one thing that might cross my mind. If I pick tunes only for the lowest common denominator, that could be a mistake because oftentimes the lowest common denominator is the lowest common denominator because they have a bad attitude and they're not actually a team player and they're not coachable. So if I pick tunes just for that person, it's likely that person is going to be crap at those tunes.
No matter what you pick.
Okay.
I see.
And the issue is not that they're a weak player, but they're a weak team player. Right. So I would be very careful to select tunes on the easier side to accommodate people who are not good team players. Right. By the way, you could have the exact same problem on the other side of things. Are there people in your band that are hanging around strictly because they're the big fish and it accommodates their ego needs? And so, like those people could handle those Glenfiddich level tunes, I suppose, on paper. Certainly they could pick it up more easily than the rest of the band. And that's sort of what they're demanding in order to stay interested. And if you don't do stuff that's interesting for them, then they're going to leave. And it's like, well, you don't want to do stuff just for them either. So what I would try to consider is, what's the core of your group from a team standpoint? Who are the people in there that are your best team players? And I would pick music that suits those people the best, because chances are the people that are not good team players are not going to be around a long period of time anyway, whether you like it or not, even if they are really good. Really good. So think about that. And then usually your best players, if they are way above the level of the rest of the group, okay, if they are good team players, then they're going to be okay with the fact that the material doesn't challenge them as much. And if they're not, they're going to go away anyway. And that might not be because they're mad. It might just be because it's the right thing for them to do. And you should probably be supportive of that anyway.
I feel like I've encountered some kind of saged wisdom somewhere that, I won't be able to put it eloquently, right? But the idea being something like a person who is truly good at their craft or truly committed to it or really into it, as it were, right, will be able to find reasons to love any iteration of that craft.
That's right.
And so I would imagine that like a highly proficient player, if they're going to be playing a very, we might say, basic tune, then they're going to have a lot of joy focusing on steadiness of blowing or intonation or something. There will be some element there that
or
they
helping
can really
others.
dig into and still.
That's right.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Yes.
that's the most ideal. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I have a little bit of all that. So if I'm playing in a lower grade band, for whatever reason, which, by the way, I haven't done in quite a while, but there's a lot of stuff there that still keeps me tied in and interested. Like I can still work on my own playing, even though I'm playing easier material. The material might be easy, but I can still improve my ensemble thinking, or I can improve my own personal bagpipe quality or something like that. So there's always lots of things that could keep you interested. And then I've always enjoyed trying to help people get better, perhaps to a fault, to the point where I'll let the focus on my own playing take a backseat to helping others. So anyway, I don't want to get too far off topic, Jim, but the material that you pick, it should be well suited to the core of your group from a team standpoint.
That makes sense. And the person writing in mentioned, like, keeping in mind that you can do, like you've described before, Andrew, you can have the newer players adjust the embellishments and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. That is, in fact, maybe that should be an element in what you're doing.
Or your newer players that have trouble keeping up, there might be a point that comes where they need to sit out because they're not ready yet. And that's okay. And a new player should be okay with that. I think theoretically, as long as things are communicated well and expectations are set properly from the beginning.
Seems like that's an understandable thing to do, yeah. Have you ever done the thing where you just write a slow moving harmony and you just say, oh, you know what? We'll just have so-and-so play a C for the whole measure.
Well,
and it should sound great.
In extreme cases, maybe, but like you wouldn't want to make that the thing, that you do. We don't really want beginners playing long note harmonies. We kind of want them learning the stuff and being able to do it. So I wouldn't make that a harmony, but maybe in an extreme pinch.
I've done it for myself before. When I was in high school and a couple buddies and I wanted to play Hellbound Train, I couldn't keep up. And so I just wrote an adjusted, I used the same chord progression, but just wrote an adjusted version of the part I was supposed to be playing. And it worked out okay until I could get up to speed to where I could play the real deal.
Yeah, there you go. Every now and then, maybe. Why not?
Yeah. Andrew, what do you think of this? There was one year when my best buddy, who was the best piper I've ever known personally, was picking the tunes for our grade 4 band. And 2 of the tunes in the same medley were really difficult. I know one was the Conundrum, and the other was, I believe, was Hold On. Are you familiar with Hold On?
Yeah.
It's got kind of a funny rhythm thing going to it.
Not only am I familiar with that, I think I played that around the world, Jim.
I wrote that tune.
I think I was in the SFU pipe band when they were playing it. It's an Adam Quinn tune, right?
That sounds right. I feel like I can see Adam Quinn's name in the top right corner. Yeah, I think that's
there
right.
It is.
So groovy. It's so groovy.
It's so groovy, but also, no, don't do that in your beginner band.
Here's the thing. Those tunes were really difficult. That year, we did not do competitively super great. But by the end of that year, those tunes that we'd been dreading working on those tunes because they were so hard. For me, for sure, and we talked about this in the group, for several other people too, they'd become some of our favorite tunes. And they're tunes that, I probably still don't play them super well, but they are favorite tunes for me now, even years later. And we're talking probably pushing 10 years now. They're still part of my regular, I'm going to go strike in and play in the backyard for a bit. I'm so glad I learned those tunes, and I never would have if somebody hadn't made me do so. And so is there an element of push them for their own sake? You know what I mean?
There certainly is. That idea has merit. The question is, how far do you run with that?
Yeah. Well, like I say, we didn't do well competitively that year. And so that's where it's what's your focus maybe? Which thing are you trying to serve more? Did we sacrifice a trophy in order to get some sort of personal enjoyment? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Slightly pushing it, right? Picking repertoire for where your players are going to be in 6 months. There's definitely some merit to that. But what you see is people pick material that are going to be where those players are going to hopefully be in 6 years.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's gamesmanship there, right? You're basically saying you're going to take that gamble and you're going to say the judge is going to reward a band that plays difficult material, despite the fact that it's not played that well, because the judge will know that it's difficult, right? And that strategy, there might be something to that, but in my experience, it would only be in the minutia of it. I might say, wow, they played that difficult tune really pretty darn well. But I'm not going to say, wow, they selected a really courageous tune. And even though
and end your sentence there,
yeah,
and
exactly.
not say anything about how they executed.
Right. And even though it was a complete train wreck, like kudos to them. That's not really it.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you hear that. It's like a grade 4 band playing Bonnie Ann. It's like, nope, we didn't need to do that.
It was the exact same friend who, when I was soloing, I think I'd moved into grade 3, but it might have actually been a year that I was still in grade 4, that he was like, this is the tune you need to solo with this year. It was Bonnie Ann.
Yeah, no.
And I'm glad now, looking back, that's the hardest I ever worked on a tune, and I'm glad I did it, because a lot of things about my playing got better. But
it's
I didn't do great competitively, so.
It's possible that you should play Bonnie Ann in solos, but it's really unlikely. So what you should do in that case, in the case that there's a tune that you really love, but it's crazy, is you can put it in the rotation with other tunes that are quote unquote more appropriate for the level.
Sure. Yeah.
People said, by the way, this just happened to me. I was judging and people were like, aren't you sick of hearing Donald McLean's Farewell to Oban? Answer, if played well, I'm not sick of it at all. And no judge should penalize someone for playing something that's overplayed. Does it happen? Possibly. But hearing something that's really well played, I don't care what it is. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
If everyone in the contest played Donald McLean's Farewell to Oban, I might chuckle and say, ha ha ha. But if that's the right tune, then that's what you should play.
I remember years ago, it has been years now, asking Josh McEachran of Chantarant fame how he felt about pineapple on pizza. And he mentioned something like, I'm a big fan of simple things done well, so I'd rather have a basic pepperoni pizza that's really well done. And I feel like that's maybe a useful.
I like.
Oh, I do too.
Yeah.
I like the weird pizzas, man, for sure. Give me all of that. But maybe it's a useful analogy to just point out, like, whom among us is tired of pepperoni pizza right now, in spite of the fact that we've been eating it pretty regularly most of our lives.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's
it's
kind
still
of the
great.
thing, like
pepperoni pizza.
It's still great, right? And so if you hear the same tune for the 12th time of the day, and you've been hearing that same tune a dozen times at every competition for a decade, maybe it's pepperoni pizza. If it's done well, it's still great.
The problem with that analogy, Jim, is that it's really hard to screw up a pizza.
So maybe we need to pick a different food.
Maybe steak. Like, should we go with steak?
Okay, there we go. We can go with steak. I've had good steaks and bad steaks, sure.
Yeah, and do you need steak sauce and truffle butter? All the fancy things you could do to a steak. Do you need all that? Or is just a beautifully done steak with simple salt and pepper, actually properly done? Is that what you really care about? And then would you care about the truffle butter if the steak was overcooked and super chewy and inedible?
That seems like a strong
steak is an easy thing to screw up. Steak is an easy thing to screw up. And you do see people do fancy stuff with steak. Like you could put what's the steak? Au poivre. And you could have the mushrooms.
Yeah, you could also just completely bury it in, it could just be completely buried in mashed potatoes. So you just
or you could just spray ranch dressing on it, which might be delicious.
You could. I've never tried ranch on a steak, but maybe it is. Yeah, maybe it's great.
But so the question is, can you cook a really nice steak? Right? It's a tricky thing to do. And then going super fancy with it, is that going to be the right decision or not? And the answer is, if you're a beginner or an intermediate chef, just focus on getting a nice, simple salt and pepper seasoning. I'm thinking. Oh,
yeah.
And then just cook it really well. Nice sear on the outside, medium rare on the inside.
Yeah. Just a couple weeks ago, my brother-in-law is a very good cook. He prepared steak for the whole family. It's a lot of steak. And that was it. It was just the meat with some salt and pepper, and it was delicious.
And it nailed it, right?
Really good. Really good.
Yeah, and someone who's a really good cook, as you say, why would they do it like that? Isn't that boring? Isn't that overplayed?
Mm.
Is a really good steak, and apologies to the vegetarians out there, but like is a really good steak that's not where you don't do anything fancy, but it's really good. I mean, is that actually overplayed, Jim?
I don't think it's overplayed.
I don't think it's overplayed at all. Do not worry about playing Donald McLean's Farewell to Oban because you're worried that it's overplayed. No, if it's perfectly seasoned with a great sear on the outside and medium rare on the inside, your Donald McLean's Farewell to Oban is going to be really appreciated by the judge.
Yeah.
By a good judge. There's lots of bad judges out there.
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of the challenge too, right?
Let me correct that statement. I actually haven't really ever met any really bad judges, but there are judges out there with a few bad habits that we might want to work on. In my opinion, one of the things is when a judge says, "Oh, I can't stand that tune; it's so overplayed." Like, yeah, I think there are people out there who have that reaction, but that reaction would be wrong, incorrect.
Yeah,
another one that really annoys me is like, "Oh, their pitch was too high." That's another one.
Yeah.
That's another one. It's like, okay, cool. Like, maybe their pitch was too high, but what about the fact that the rest of the performance was really, really well done?
Yeah.
Like they just can't you just can't see by these trivial things and you can't judge the big picture. So that's bad. But yeah, a good judge is going to love a well done tune, even if it is overplayed. By the way, well done doesn't mean overcooked. We're mixing it. I'm careful with mixing it.
Mixing analogies there.
Now, is it possible that a steak can be augmented and improved by adding like the sauces and the sauteed onions and the mushrooms and the truffle butter and the lobster mac and cheese on the side and served on a super hot plate that like comes out of the oven? And I don't know, what else do they do to steaks? Oh, and they do the flambe thing where they go whoosh, and they light it on fire in front of you. Yeah. Is it possible that steak can be greatly elevated by these things? Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But is it necessary? No, it's not. And so anyway, my point is, what is my point, Jim? When you pick your tunes for your band, you have to take these things into account and you have to make good decisions.
Yeah, I've also had steaks where, I think of one experience I had with my paternal grandfather where I was helping him move and we found some steaks that had been in the bottom of his freezer for a lot of years and he decided to cook them for us that night. And so it was like between the freezer burnt parts and the burnt on the grill parts, we needed a lot of steak sauce. And so sometimes all that extra stuff is necessary to be able to choke it down.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not what you want your tune selection to be.
But you're probably never but you might need it to choke it down, but it would be a terrible thing to choose that on purpose. Which, by the way, that's a good analogy for bands that refuse to ever change their material because they think this is the year. The fourth year of playing the same set, this is going to be the one where you're finally going to turn the corner. That's bad decision making.
By the way,
for
sake of it's freezer burned. That's the problem with
this set is freezer burned, and a lot of times that happens too.
I feel like for the sake of making this comfortable for vegetarians as well, I feel like the same can be said of Brussels sprouts. They can be prepared so nicely if they're cooked the right amount of time with enough moisture and there's salt and pepper on them. I feel like they can be the most delicious vegetable.
Absolutely.
But they can be really easily ruined as well. And
strong analogy, Jim. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And you need it, right? Like you need Brussels sprouts. One of those things where it's like, would this be better with sweet potatoes covered in marshmallows? And the answer is no.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like you could do some wild and crazy Cheesecake Factory stuff. Okay. But that's wrong, right? Like you want steak and you want your vegetables, your neeps and your tatties and your Brussels sprouts. You need those with these dishes. Just like you need the map tunes, you need those classic tunes. And that's the prescribed tunes. It's part of it. When you're competing at the lower levels, lower not to be confused with bad, like, when you're just getting started, right? You need to cook me Brussels sprouts. The judge does not want sweet potatoes covered in marshmallows.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
It's not time for that.
We want Brussels sprouts really well done. Can you sprinkle some balsamic on the Brussels sprouts? You can, but that's not necessarily it. That's not necessarily what is going to be required to win. Like, do you need to somehow make those purple Brussels sprouts that are a completely different color than other? No. The Brussels sprouts just have to be good, Jim. It has to be Brussels sprouts, and then you have to make it good. It's not easy, but that is the task.
And Andrew, I don't want to throw this off or anything, but I don't know what neeps and tatties are. What are neeps and tatties?
I think neeps, and again, I'm out of my depth slightly. Neeps would be a short for turnips.
Oh, sure, yeah. And then tatties would be potatoes?
Potatoes, yeah.
Neeps and tatties. I've never heard that before, but I really like it. I'm
really?
going to say that.
Oh, man,
Neeps
Jim.
And tatties.
Jim, we got to get you out in the world.
I'm not cultured. I need to get out there.
Yeah, I feel like if you go to a restaurant in Scotland, off the beaten path, you might order something like the haggis.
Neeps and tatties.
And then on the side, there might be some neeps and tatties on the side, maybe.
Neeps and tatties. I like
maybe?
it.
It's kind of like, you're going to get some of that. You're going to get some porridge and stuff.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail it with the neeps and tatties question.
No, that's a good question.
Now I know. And maybe the neeps and tatties are exactly what this list is. This is the straightforward, this is the stuff you need, the neeps and tatties.
Yeah, that's right. And as you get better, you can entertain more and more fancy stuff.
We're thinking maybe the cynical theory is nothing more than a theory, and maybe it's not the case.
Yeah,
but is there a little bit of room for it to maybe be the case? Because I'm into these, like it's a shadowy conspiracy. I like stuff like that. I think it's fun.
Right, but I don't think in this case it's a shadowy conspiracy. I think people do some wild stuff, and that makes it very difficult to compare. So the constraints are important just for logistical reasons, but they're also important for pedagogical reasons. And you need people to learn the basics before they branch off and do the wild and crazies.
I'm just Googling pedagogical real quick.
Pedagogy.
As opposed to
I was going
manicurological?
I was going with like pedagogy, like teaching. Pedagogy.
Yes.
Pedagogical.
I've heard that word.
Yeah.
Related to teaching. Pedagogical. Gotcha.
Yeah. So like as a teacher, you want people to understand the basics to at least a certain degree before they branch out and do the wild and crazy stuff. So in the entry-level grades, we definitely want some of these classic marches. And then as you progress, once you get into grade 3 and stuff, you're doing like a medley where you get to pick all the tunes. And then you get into grade 1 at the very top. There's still constraints, but then you see bands trying to do all sorts of balsamic bacon, thick cut bacon, pineapple, balsamic mixtures to give themselves the edge, which is kind of cool. Quadruple axles.
To be clear, I'm all about all that stuff. All of it. So
it can be frustrating
basic
because
stuff's done well too.
Yeah, it could be frustrating because we're all searching for an edge and we'd all like to do better in competition. But at the risk of taking this down another tangent, the secret to success in competition is being better than your competitors at the things that are important.
But do you think part of this too, Andrew, is that, of course, it's the grade 1 groups and individuals that we're all watching and listening to all the time. And so maybe even unconsciously we're reaching for those fancy things that it's like, I saw so-and-so in their 5-star restaurant using this mushroom sauce, so I'm going to put mushroom sauce on everything.
Right.
And it's like, mushroom sauce ain't good on cold cereal, like don't do that with what you got in your own kitchen.
Yeah, that's right. And then I think the really good cooking shows that you see on TV are amazing chefs that are encouraging you to do the basics really well. And then it's like, not too gimmicky. Like Alton Brown was always the best on the Food Network, wasn't he? I forget that show.
Alton Brown.
Yeah, like back in the day before we had kids. Every meal is now mac and cheese and chicken nuggets. But before that, my wife used to love watching the food, and she still does, but she used to watch the Food Network. But like Alton Brown, he's like teaching you how to make a great turkey or something. Or like, how do you make a great steak? It was almost like Mythbusters for basic food items. And like Alton Brown was the best because he's trying to teach you the explanations and trying to get you down to the basics. And meanwhile, you have other shows where it's like, let's see what kind of wild and crazy, silly combinations we can stick together and see the various ways you can burn down your own kitchen.
Yeah. The cooking show I've watched the most of is Julia Child, and that was because
I'm not an expert there, but I feel like she was good with that too. Like she was teaching you how to do the basics really well on television.
Oh, for sure, yeah. But it also was fun to hear her voice coming out of her face instead of a puppet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, of course, I watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and her voice was, I'm trying to remember what character her voice was, which puppet it was, but I know it was one of the puppets. Hang on. This is worth checking. Julia
check it,
Child puppet.
This is what the people care about, Jim.
Oh, it's got to be. She must have been on Mr. Rogers. I'm sure it was her voice. It had to have been her voice. Maybe
I
not.
don't think you're right. No, I don't think so.
I thought it was her.
She was too busy doing like CIA ops and stuff, wasn't she?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Lady Elaine. Lady Elaine Fairchild. I thought that she was...
Her voice might have been modeled after Julia Child, but it wasn't her, was it?
Who did the voice of Lady Elaine? What?
Wasn't Lady Elaine?
Fred Rogers.
Yeah, Fred Rogers did all the voices. Yeah.
I thought that was Julia Child my whole life until this moment. I've thought that was Julia Child.
But it's just a guy with good basic skills.
Good job bringing it back in.
I tried. It was just a guy with amazing television skills, Jim, doing the basics really well.
Yep. Well, there you go. That's rocking
Jim,
my world.
Thanks for landing the plane on this one today, Jim. Good job.
Oh, yeah. You're welcome. I was best conversation partner in the world over here. Yeah, you
Absolutely.
bet.
I talk to more and more people, Jim, that love our show, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, it was nice knowing them. Hey, everybody. Andrew Douglas here from the Piper's Dojo, and I just want to say thanks so much for listening to today's iteration of the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard here today, it would be super helpful to us and to a lot of bagpipers out there trying to find us. If you could give us a top-notch review on whatever platform you're using to listen to this podcast, particularly Apple, iTunes, and Spotify and things like that, your review would be really, really helpful. So if you have a moment today, definitely go over there and help us out. Other than that, until we meet again on the podcast or somewhere else, thanks again for listening.